It is 2/28 of 2015. We are toward the latter portion of Robert Jenson's book on his systematic theology and the triune God. We're going to take a look at his doctrine of concept, and what that means is that it's his doctrine of God proper. A concept is a term that abbreviates a series of sub-concepts that fall under it, and so it becomes like the primary categorical identifier for the doctrine of God. So it becomes that abbreviating concept or that abbreviating category. He's already given us his concluding look at crucifixion, his concluding look at resurrection, and those two consolidating chapters were given at the end of the book in order to reach the doctrine of God proper as his postscript on the entire doctrine, which would be the doctrine of the concept. It was in pages 207 to 221. We'll take a look at that. And it begins, of course, it's going to be a triad. He likes following the Hegelian thought patterns. It will be a triad. And we're going to start with the first moment, which is going to be the Greek telos. And the Greek telos means plan or basically we translate it in English as teleology. It's like the teleology that is present within history, within finitude. And his first moment, he wants to discuss the Greek telos of what was mistakenly, during the classical period, a timeless beyond of the temporal cosmos, timeless beyond of the temporal cosmos. So eon became the telos that embraces the wholeness of life, and it is a timeless beyond of the temporal dimension of the cosmos. It's impassible and motionless, and from this telos, the temporal cosmos derives its being and its life. So being becomes equated with the temporal derivative from the telos divinity. Finitude gains a temporal derivative from the telos divinity. So to be is to be as the impassible telos. You are to seek impassibility. You are to seek an escape from temporality. Now, the three axioms of this view of the telos: first, it is an immunity to time. Two, it's an eidos form unaffected by temporality. If you just think of the Platonic and Aristotelian area of the eidos forms. Third, it is the coming to word as perceived eidos shape. And then Jenson said this severely contradicts the biblical God of eternity. Therefore, he gives us this first moment, in order to tell us this type of thinking needs to be negated, absolutely negated. So he begins with, he doesn't begin with the ideal this time, he begins with negation as the first moment. Almost as if he's saying we begin immediately with deconstruction, with the contamination of the doctrine of God by the Greek classical period. We begin with deconstruction. So he's kind of taken that's more or less a postmodern view, and of course he is nothing even close to a postmodern. He's very, very conservative, but he does borrow that idea. He says we are in desperate need to deconstruct classical impassibility of the telos divinity. For the second moment, he wants to discuss Aquinas and his Thomas Aquinas' concept of instantiation, and he wants to talk about Karl Barth's concept of pure duration. So instantiation and pure duration. Now, under Aquinas and instantiation, being is distinct from essence, form and matter are in need of an instantiation as essence. So it's not simply the Platonic duality of form and matter. There's a third element of essence. So being actually equals the actuality of essence. Being is what a temporality eschatologically might be or might reach. So being is the eschatology of what may be. The being of God is his essence. And Jenson likes this. He likes this look, but he wants to modify Aquinas. And he does that, of course, with the Trinity. There are three instantiations within the divine ousia space. The ousia space is the tri-mutual energia of the tri-mutual work within God the Father, within that ousia space. Therefore, God's being must be a tri-mutual being event. But then he goes on and he says, but we do need to posit a divine ousia nature. We need to at least posit that identity as an instantiation of concept. And so he does feel challenged by Aquinas. And he says, and this will be as the infinity of something. There will be an actual positing of the instantiation of concept within the divine ousia nature, and it will be some form of infinity, the infinity of something. So it does take up the Aquinas challenge. Now, under this idea of instantiation coupled with ousia nature, the two could be synthesized as a concept of temporal infinity for Jenson. We could actually bring them together under the concept of temporal infinity. Temporal infinity equals the fact that no contingent activity can keep up with God's eschatological activity. No contingent activity or narrative can keep up with God's eschatological open activity. God is infinite over past and future, and this identifies the Logos as God. Therefore, deity equals endless futurity. Now, he also wants to borrow from Karl Barth's concept of pure duration, and pure duration is an enchaining of source, movement, and goal that cannot fall apart. Source, movement, and goal that cannot fall apart. And that enchaining possesses no internal conflict. In this way, God does not lack time. Instead, he takes up time. So he likes that idea from Barth, and he's going to borrow that, and he's going to borrow the challenge from Aquinas of instantiation. But both are going to be nested within the doctrine of the tri-mutuality of the Trinity, within the ousia space. So he wants to talk about that. He wants to talk about that conclusive place where these two contributors have brought him, and that is to view God as the concept of temporally infinite. God as the concept of temporally infinite, temporal infinity. So source and goal are present within God. By being spirit, the concept of God avoids the negativity of timeless form. Spirit supplies the temporal character role for the tri-mutuality within the ousia space. There are three axioms of the concept. First, God remains creatively open to what he will be. Two, God sustains the relational event of giving and receiving that takes place within the ousia space within the Father. And third, God the Father is the one who perfectly anticipates. This interpretation of concept is consistent with the Old Testament Judaic narrative, which Jenson, of course, says we need to remain consistent with. He gives two examples, Psalm 119, where we read, "Forever thy word is fixed in the heavens," and Isaiah 55:3, where everlasting covenant is coupled with steadfast love. So it's an example, he says, of what for the Judaic faith defined as eternity. Eternity was God's faithfulness within temporal history. its faithfulness within temporal history. So we're looking at a more consistent view he feels if we stick with the consistent alignment with the Judaic narrative and Judaic faith. Now, this interpretation of concept is consistent not only with Judaic narrative, but the tri-mutual relations of being temporally infinite also consists of the following relational description. The Father is the whence of God's life. The Spirit is the whither of God's life. The Son is the spacious present reality of the intersecting event. So he comes up with the conclusion that whence and whither are reconciled in the action of the suffering of the Son. Advent and distribution out of the ousia space consists of the following. The temporally infinite love comes to us as the advent of the kingdom. This distribution is always an unsurpassable moment which takes up three aspects of transcendence. Immunity to unbelief, a transcendence over the impossibility of finite labor, and the fact that there is an unconditionality of the gospel promise in its aspect of being a universality. It's a universality and an unconditionality. So it gives us a very brief look, but it gives us a better idea of how Jenson negates the Greek impassibility of telos, feels challenged by Aquinas, feels a kinship to Karl Barth, and by taking up Aquinas and Barth, he could, and negating the telos of the Greek classical period, he could come up with a temporally infinite concept of God, which is relational and consistent with Old Testament narrative. And that'll give us a very quick look at the doctrine of concept.